The workplace can be fast-paced, competitive, and at times stressful. It demands the way we perform at our best, be productive, confused, or being focused and get along with colleagues, management, or clients. This is where meditation and mindfulness come in, helping you to feel less stressed, be less reactive, and improve your compassion while simultaneously strengthening area of focus, productivity, and resilience. A very warm welcome to the show. This is EI Cafe with Azim, Season 4. I'm your host, Azim Sahil, a human capital specialist, a Lego series play facilitator, ICF certified coach, and an emotionally intelligent practitioner. Here we are again for another interesting episode, a 30 minutes of valuable learning. In today's episode, we did hear about a little bit of the introduction, but let me introduce the topic, mindfulness. One of the hot topic has been spoken around the world, and let thought of getting into the cafe a resource person to talk about mindfulness as a superpower in the workplace. Now, when you talk about workplace, we know work from home, hybrid work, working from office, anything can be involved. But to discuss this, I have a fantastic guest all the way from New Zealand. Let me introduce her. For over 20 years, she has been helping people learn how to successfully navigate through change, challenge, and uncertainty. I think a fantastic topic, a person who reflects to the current context. A former competitive runner, a senior leader in the corporate world. She discovered mindfulness to help her navigate her own challenges and change in the form of an autoimmune, if I believe I would have spelled correctly, pronounced correctly, condition, chronic pain, double hip replacement, ongoing stress, corporate burnout. That's the word I'm looking for. Lottie, I think I introduced the name, trained as a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher. She's also a certified emotional culture specialist and a facilitator of the Emotional Culture Tech, the host of Vulnerability Effect podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Lotty Roberts, founder, director of MyNew.
Hi there, Azim.
Lottie, officially welcome you. Welcome to the cafe.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
All right. First and foremost, Lottie, thank you very much for accepting my invitation and joining, checking into the cafe to discuss an important topic, especially today's context. I think this is very relevant. We are going to explore little, I think, certain element where mindfulness, the word mindfulness has been talk of the town, the whole world. So in that context, I choose the topic mindfulness as a superpower in the workplace. How does it going to relate? So Lottie, my first question is, we know, everybody knows, there's a lot of article, what is mindfulness, but we would like to hear from an expert, what is mindfulness? Over to you.
So the definition in terms of like the Oxford University, I will start with the Oxford University mindfulness definition, is it means mindfulness actually simply means awareness. It translates to awareness. So to be mindful is to be aware of your of the moment, of the present moment, and then what's going on in your body, in your mind, and I also like to think in your environment as well. It's kind of like training a muscle, training your attention to where you want it to be, which is hard in this attention economy. And also to be present without being kind of overly overwhelmed or reactive to it. So you're more responsive to it and bringing some kind of curiosity and compassion. I like to think compassion is a key component of it too.
Right. It's really interesting to see here, Lottie, that you said the word compassion. How does it connect? I know empathy and compassion can be, but mindfulness, how does it connect with compassion?
So first of all, mindfulness is such a huge subject. It's kind of hard to talk about it in 20 to 30 minutes. But one of the foundational attitudes of mindfulness is loving kindness. And actually, if you look a bit deeper into some of the philosophy behind mindfulness, we talk about what's called the Brahma Viharas, which are these they actually call them 4 heavenly abodes. You don't have to be a religious to kind of cultivate them though, which are compassion, kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And so compassion is a very important element. And I can talk about this later in the workplace, because to be present and to be aware, sometimes we could be, for example, aware of something that we're doing that we think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But actually to bring that compassion to ourselves or compassion to others is really important. It opens us up. It enables us to be with suffering, if you like, in an open-hearted way. So very important. But I guess as we get more in the conversation, then you'll
Absolutely.
understand the context
Yeah,
within the
absolutely.
workplace.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Now, here's what everybody looks for, right? Why we have to do mindfulness, why we have to be mindfulness, what are the benefits, especially in the workplace. Lot of in I talk about workplace now, we are in the condition of working from home, hybrid working. Now, earlier when you say workplace, it's an office environment. Now it's different. What are the benefits of mindfulness in the workplace?
I guess before I talk about the benefits, you were sort of saying like, why is it important? And I think the why is really important before I get to the benefits. And the way I explain that, well, if I do presentations, I get people to put their hand up if they answer yes to any of these questions. And I'll ask questions like, put your hand up if you find yourself looking at your phone at something and not coming up for 40 to 45 minutes later. Put your hand up if you find you can't sleep because you're ruminating on something that happened in the day or something that's going to happen tomorrow. Put your hand up if you've ever reacted and snapped at somebody, quite often somebody dear to you, out of nowhere. Put your hand up if you look at your emails in the first 10 minutes of getting up in the morning. So all of these things are causing us to be stressed and not present. But also we're in this world that I like to call a Vegas on our senses. If anybody's been to Vegas, and even if you haven't, you go there, big lights, big city, always something to do, always something to grab your attention. It's great to be there for a day or two, but you wouldn't want to live there. I mean, it's just an overload. And we're in the workplace, whether you be working from home, in a virtual workplace, or in the office. Really, the world around us is a Vegas on our senses. We have long to-do lists. We have big commitments. We find it very hard to pay attention. We're in this kind of attention economy, which everything's trying to grab our attention. And so the research says we are only present about half the time. And when we're not present, our mind wanders to places that are often not helpful or in line with what is most important to us. So that's a bit about the why. In terms of the benefits, well, really, I want to be really clear, because it's obviously, I've said it's a superpower in the workplace. It is, but it's not like a one-stop shop. It takes time to cultivate. But in terms of the benefits, it trains our attention to be more focused. So we find that we can be more focused. We find that we can reduce our anxiety, reduce our mind wandering. It helps our physical wellness. It helps relationship conflicts. It helps our ability to be self-aware, regulate our emotions, improves our resilience. So all this is backed up by lots of research. And the reason it does that is it actually starts to change our brain. I'll just give you a little bit of a background around some of the brain changes. So there's a really good study by a lady called Sarah Lazar. She used to be a runner, and I believe the story is she got injured, and she started herself going to yoga and doing some meditation, and noticed the differences in herself. So being a research fellow, she started to research this. And she got people to go through 90 days of mindfulness meditation. She had people that did and people that didn't, and they like MRI'd their brains before and after, and they saw that there were some changes in the brains. And the changes of the people that meditated, their amygdalas shrunk, and their amygdala is their stress response center. Your amygdala is really helpful if there is something that is endangering your life. That's why
Yes.
it's there.
Mm,
But in this modern day, our amygdala is going off left, right, and center just through the day-to-day stresses that we're facing.
mm, mm,
And when that happens, it closes down our ability to be creative, to
mm,
problem solve, to regulate our emotions,
mm.
to come up with, to make good decisions. So all of these things are really important as well in stressful situations. So mindfulness can actually help all of these skills to be cultivated, but by shrinking the amygdala and also switching on some of those other areas in the brain.
Wow.
Sounds very simplistic,
Yeah.
but not possibly as simple in the background as
Right.
it
Uh,
sounds.
Absolutely. I think you did highlight the core problems most of the organization really face: collaboration, communication, relationship, conflict management,
Yes, yeah,
problem
all of
solving.
that.
Yeah, all of that. That's because
Yeah,
those are the opportunities we get as facilitators to come and really clear things
yep,
out. But if you really focus on mindfulness, I really like this, you brought this element of self-awareness, being the present moment of time and the place, and you being realized, and bring that little bit of compassion and empathy into the picture. I think it'll be a lovely recipe to work on, Lottie. Thank you very much for sharing that golden nugget for our
yeah.
listeners. uh,
I say
yeah.
at the deepest level in the workplace, it's really about our ability to, like, cultivating the ability to be more human in a
mm,
modern day workplace, to
mm,
reconnect ourselves to each other
mm,
and to what truly matters, rather than being kind of stuck in the self, stuck
mm,
independently.
yeah.
So let's us step out of autopilot, if you like, which we are quite often in.
Yeah, so we are talking this in the verge where people are talking about automation, digitalization, and artificial intelligence, and still that human element is making a big impact in organization, isn't it, Lottie?
Well, at the heart of any organization, it's that, like, the humans. You can automate some things, but
Yeah.
it's at the heart of any good organization are people.
Mm, absolutely.
And you know, and how people feel. We're going to talk about emotional culture later.
Yes, yes,
How
yes.
people feel and where their attention is and what they're
Mm,
focusing on, and their
mm,
ability to navigate challenge and
mm,
uncertainty. We're in such a challenging and
mm,
uncertain, well, uncertainty has always been there, but it's more prevalent than ever and
mm,
more challenge. So
mm,
our ability to be with that and
mm.
navigate that is becoming more and more important.
Absolutely, absolutely. As you are talking about the culture, here's the next question for you. Is building an emotional culture vital for building mindfulness in workplace? What do you think?
Yep, absolutely. So you can't actually separate the two. So when you become more mindful, um, as a consequence, you actually become more aware of your emotions, more aware of people around you. How it links to the emotional culture work in terms of what I do. So I call emotional culture work is like the Trojan horse for getting workplaces and organizations to adopt mindfulness, because there's a big misconception around mindfulness that it's just about being calm. Mindfulness is about experiencing the nature of reality. And sometimes the nature of reality is that it sucks. Okay. How can you be with the suck? How can you be with the sing? So life sucks and it sings is a John Kabat-Zinn, who is the person who founded mindfulness-based stress reduction,
Mm,
talks about that life sucks and it sings. Everything changes. Don't take it personally. And so mindfulness is about being able to be with the suck, ride out the suck and savor the sing, and
mm,
know that everything's going to change in every moment. So coming back to the emotional culture, because there's been this misconception a lot of the times around mindfulness, people kind of see it as something that's a well-being tick. They
mm,
don't really see the full breadth of what it actually is.
mm,
They want things that are more tangible tools, and they because of this misconception, they're kind of blinkered to its I guess the extent of what it can provide. So when I started training in emotional culture, and I know you've had Jeremy on with the emotional culture deck, I was like, wow, this is kind of mindfulness. When you start to check in, be self-aware. What am I feeling right now? When I find out how I'm feeling, how do I show up when I'm feeling this versus how do I show up when I'm feeling that? What are people around me feeling? You're actually starting to become more mindful, to become more self-aware. So I call emotional culture the Trojan horse. Brené Brown actually came up with the definition of like bringing this in, like bringing things in as a Trojan horse, where you actually bring something in, you say, what I'm going to do is this, but actually in the background, this is how I get mindfulness in. So sometimes the first way I will enter an organization and get an organization open to being more mindful as a byproduct is to come in with emotional culture. How people feel at work and being aware of how they feel and how everyone else feels, and knowing that basically drives performance. And I know Jeremy has gone into some depth with this, but how you feel at work drives soft measures and hard measures. It drives collaboration. It drives staff retention. It drives, creativity, working as a team. But it also, if you're feeling the bad feels, the funky feels, as I call them, you're not so likely, people are going to leave. It affects financial performance. It affects, engagement. So this is still mindfulness. How I heard it described, actually, Daniel Goleman, when he talks about emotional intelligence, he has mindfulness as one of the components. And I've heard it described as if like emotional intelligence was the car, mindfulness would be one of the passengers in the car. Now, he's much more well-known than me, and I love his work, but I like to think that mindfulness is the car and that emotional intelligence is kind of one of the very important passengers.
Might be the driver.
Along with compassion and empathy. And but the most important thing is they sit in a family.
Absolutely. I am trying to resonate, right? When you drive in a huge traffic, if you don't have that mindfulness, I think you will go crazy, isn't it, Lottie?
I think you acquire what's called, and it's probably one of the end goals of mindfulness is equanimity, being with what is. And actually, one of the other foundational attitudes I talked about, loving kindness and compassion, right. But another one is acceptance. Acceptance is, like I was saying, like when the world sucks, when things we're in a pandemic at the moment. We can try and resist that, but that is reality at the moment, and we have to change and adapt to be able to live in that world. It's all about, I guess, reducing our suffering, like being able to suffer better is another way I describe cultivating. When you cultivate mindfulness, you've learned to suffer better.
I think I just want to relate this. Jay Shetty, on his book Think Like a Monk, he said there's no positive and negative, it's just the experience. You need to have it and just try to enjoy that particular moment, whatever it is, and adapt to it. I think that's what you're trying to relate, Lottie, over here.
Yeah.
So
or maybe not even enjoy it, but accept it. Accept that is, and that because everything changes, so life sucks and it sings. So everything changes. Try not to take it so personally. Those three things could be a manifesto for life. Those three sentences, So and the no, not good or bad is a key part of the emotional culture that we do. We say feelings aren't good or bad, they just are. They might be pleasant or unpleasant. And in mindfulness, we're really bringing awareness to pleasant and unpleasant and neutral experiences. Because what actually makes up our experience is everything that comes into our awareness. So everything that we place our attention on. There's a beautiful quote I love, which is, tell me what you focus on and I'll tell you who you are. So it's like, what are you focusing on? The same with what you practice, like what you practice becomes what you are.
Yes.
So what
absolutely.
are you practicing? Are you practicing self-criticism, self-doubt, or are you practicing self-compassion and, being inspired and being open and curious? So that's why it is a practice. It isn't a one-stop shop.
Amazing input. I think I'm going to get a lot of nuggets from this particular episode. Before I move on next question, Lottie, in terms of organization, is it now they do build value system around the organization? Now, do you think emotion culture should be one of the values of organization to really run this particular element in organizations?
I guess it depends on what you're meaning by values, because if it's values that just sit up on a poster somewhere and they're all over the intranet and they're, you know, and they might be very good. Like when you read them, like we care about our people, we always say what we're going to do. I wouldn't say emotional culture goes up on there. I'd say emotional culture can help you create your values and can help you live your values. You know, so I think if you're talking about really valuing, what do you actually value as an organization, organizations that value how their people feel and become intentional about that, I think we'll see a real shift to the positive in terms of how results show up for them and how their culture shows up and how creative it is. And then also when you do this work on emotional culture, you can definitely help create your values out of that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. With that, here's the important part: how to be more mindful at work. I think we talked about mindfulness. Now, if you don't give this particular element to our listeners, I think we're missing the piece of the whole podcast. So, how do be more mindful at work? When you say at work means, again, reminding Lotty, it's about hybrid or working from home. And working from home has been a lot of stressful situation for many people. I think this will help them a lot.
Yeah. So there are, I've got a list of like 7 things that I generally share. There's a lot more. But the one thing I want to kind of put as a backdrop is, I think something that's really important before I go into these things is you could put out a course on mindfulness in the workplace to individuals. That's not going to create the shift. What you need to do is work on a system level. It's a little bit like burnout, which you've probably done some work on. You can work on how people individually stop themselves burning out, but if they're in a system that's inflammatory and is always going to be kind of working against that, they're still going to burn out until they get out of that system. So I just want to put that as a backdrop, because I think when I go through these points, you can adopt them individually, but I think actually, at the top, the organizational leadership really need to adopt these and build them into the system. So the first would be building in moments of pause regularly, moments of space. There is no rhythm without pause. And yet, where do you get pause and space in organizations? And I think it's becoming even worse with people working from home. They go from one Zoom meeting to the next Zoom meeting. It actually takes a lot more energy, like mental energy, to do work in a virtual environment. I do a lot of one-on-one work and I run retreats and things like that. They take a lot of energy in person, because the people that come to me, they're normally in a place where things aren't right and they need some help. And so, as an empath, I can soak that up. I've noticed virtually, I get even more drained and soak even more of that than I do in the same room, which was a surprise to me. So building in moments of pause. In that pause is that moment to, we don't just inhale, we exhale as well. But in an organization, it's just like we're going inhaling. When are we going to exhale? Where's the space for that?
Yeah.
So it could be building in, like, I'll say things and people look at me and they go, have you lost it? Like, really? I'll say, have a meeting free Friday. What? Oh, I don't know if we could do that. Or have an email free day. Most people get, I think, over 100, at least, well, definitely over 120 emails a day. Normally a leader would get more than 120 emails a day. That's probably on the light side. So that's one thing, thinking about how you build in pause and space, and knowing that in that space, have some space that's just white space. There's no agenda. I don't know if you've ever gone for a walk and all of a sudden these amazing ideas come into your head. There was no purpose to the walk, but at that moment, you notice that space has cultivated something. Role modeling attitudes of mindfulness. So things like patience. That's one that a lot of people find hard. We want things instantly. Kindness and compassion, acceptance, trust, letting go. I would say in organization, I've done a lot of work on change. When you're changing and you're leading into the new, you need to let go of something. Otherwise,
Yes.
all you're doing is adding on an extra thing for people to do when they're already
Mm,
overloaded.
mm,
Every time you let go of something, there's a space. Setting digital boundaries around our email, focusing on, being really intentional on our purpose and our why.
mm,
But I talk about this in terms of big P and little p. So your big P might be your overall statement as a company, but your little p is what gets you out of bed in the morning,
mm,
what motivates you on a day-to-day basis,
mm,
and then actively listening. That's another one. How do we get people to listen better? Normally we're waiting for a space so we can talk, wondering what we're going to say when we have that space, rather than
absolutely.
holding space for people. So that's a few things. I don't know if hopefully
Fantastic.
that's useful and gives people
Fantastic.
some ideas.
Mm, absolutely. I think I love the important part. I think the pause. For me, it's the pause, because as you said, inhale, you don't have to, to exhale the moment. Then you go, your whole mindset goes out, and it's really difficult to come back. And the second part, I really like taking that walk without any intention. You just walk, and I have experienced that, Lottie, that you suddenly get an idea, right? Why don't I do like this? That's amazing. That I think when you give the break to that brain, I think you get more. That's what we are talking about, taking breaks and recharging ourselves. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that, Lottie, on those elements. I'm just coming to the final question on our conversation. Now, here comes the most important element when you have to you talk about workplace. What is mindful leadership, and why does it matters for everyone?
This is another huge question that I could probably spend a few hours talking to rather than a few minutes. But so I guess a mindful leadership really is about role modeling those attributes of mindfulness. But the ones that come to mind, and actually some research around mindful leadership shows that mindful leaders tend to be very authentic. They're not scared to show up as they are. They don't have to put on this armor, this mask. They're very humble. And they're also very self-reflective. So they're aware of, when I do this or when I feel this happens, and then adjust as a consequence. Another study which also breaks down mindful leadership. So it was by a company called the Potential Project. There's a really great book called The Mind of the Leader, which talks a lot about this study. And they interviewed like thousands, I can't remember the exact number, but it was thousands of C-suite leaders that were seen as being very successful, high-performing leaders. And they asked them, and they'd been in those positions for a long time, so they had longevity of success. And they asked them what were the top attributes that they felt contributed to their success. And these leaders also, the other thing that made them successful, it wasn't just successful in terms of bottom line results. They also had really good engagement, like they had likability and good engagement. And so the three top attributes that came out of that study were mindfulness, self-awareness in terms of mindfulness was what came out. So like being able to understand when you're performing, how you're showing up, how you impact on others. Compassion was another one, and compassion to self as well. And then self-orientation. So being aware of the greater good. So being aware of the enterprise values and the values and the good of the organization over yourself. Right? So they would have low ego. They would be very community focused. The kind of we over I. So why it's important. So I believe we are in the most challenging times we've ever been in. We have so much that we're facing into. The climate crisis, we look at some of the breakdown and the divides between the cultural divides. There are so many problems, and the pace of change is just crazy and frenetic. And you could say that we're all going to hell in a handbasket, but I believe what will make the difference is the leadership. So there are decisions that are made in big corporates that I was talking about mindfulness being aware of yourself, your body, your mind, and the environment around you. So when I make that decision, am I just making that as decision to make a profit, or is that decision then, I don't know, impacting on the environment? Is it impacting on minorities? You know, what is the impact of this decision? So I think mindful leadership is probably, I mean, this sounds, you know, pretty big, but I believe it's the leaders of this world in positions of influence that are going to take us to a better place or not. And so I think it is so fundamental at the moment. If you read the book Sapiens, and I recently completed a course where this is another good thing about COVID, I had the privilege to complete a course with Oxford University, the Oxford School of Mindfulness. And there's an amazing professor there called William Kaiken who did this opening address. And he talked about the book Sapiens, and he read out the last page of Sapiens, which was very damning on the human race, basically saying that basically we're going to self-destruct, we're going to implode. And he said, this is pretty depressing when you read this, but I believe we're teetering on a point, and we're at a tipping point, and we can go one way or the other. And it's these big corporates, these influential leaders across the world, they are the tipping point. So this is why I believe mindful leadership is so important, being aware of your decisions, aware of how you show up and how they're impacting the wider environment rather than even just your organization.
Absolutely. I think we need to start with the leadership, otherwise taking the message of mindfulness and even people start practicing, and there is a blockade coming and bombarding the activity by the top layer, then it's really difficult to really run through these particular activities in organization. I think leadership, bringing that mindful leader, what I feel is this COVID has turned a lot of leaders into become more mindful. That's what my observation. I don't know how about yours. I think
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel now, yesterday, day before, we saw Nike, they're given 1 week holiday to just recharge themselves, put that emotional burnout out, come back very fresh. I think that those are good decisions made by not thinking only of the profitability aspect or the people aspect. So it's great. So
it is great only if when they go back after a week, the system isn't just going to burn them out again.
Absolutely.
It's like
yes.
are you treating the symptoms, or you're actually like treating the cause?
The cause, yes.
So and I think the thing to remember with leaders is, particularly really successful leaders, what got them to be successful was normally because they're really good at doing stuff. They're really good doers. They're the ones you go to, they'll get it done. But the problem is when you associate your identity as always doing stuff,
absolutely,
then you just think you have no value when you're not. I've got a saying, which is our doing should come from our being, and our being is that space, that cultivating that space, rather than our being come from our doing,
Wow.
So it's really kind of getting leaders. So some of the things that I'll talk to leaders about is not necessarily what they want to hear. It's kind of like that joke, how many psychologists it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb's got to want to change.
That's
like, how
really
many coaches does it take to change a leader? One, but the leader's got to want to change. Absolutely. And normally when they get to burnout, they're right at the end of the spectrum. So I like to think if we want to get organizations really successful at embracing a mindful culture, we need to work right from the stop at the top and role model that down. There'll be courses that I do and the leaders won't go.
Yeah.
And they need it more than anybody else.
Fantastic.
So
Lottie, thank you very much for sharing those things. So we have almost come to end of our conversation, really rich conversation, a lot of learning I have gained. Lottie, before I let you go, I just want you to give a quick one tip where people can practice to bring this mindfulness at work or home. Just one tip. I know you gave a couple of things, just one unique thing. What do you think you can do easily in a small act? What would be one?
On an individual level, I think it is building in regular pauses in your day, there's a little meditation that you can actually find on Insight Timer. And if you look up Lotty Roberts on Insight Timer, it's less than 5 minutes long. And it uses what I call stop. And so you simply stop wherever you are, feel your feet on the floor, take a breath, that deep inhale, long exhale starts to turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. Observe what's going on for you. And then in that moment, say, what can I bring into the next moments of my day? So pause regularly, but if you want to use a framework for that, then you can use the stop meditation. You could put the link in your show notes if you wish.
Yeah.
And that's just switching out of autopilot. So regularly building pause would be my number one tip.
Fantastic. That's awesome.
So very counterintuitive nowadays.
No problem. So that's the time what we have, ladies and gentlemen, for today. My key takeaways, couple of things. One is what mindfulness does for amygdala and the impact it's going to create in your workplace. That's one thing I learned a lot. The second one is pause. That pause makes us a real human being who can reflect ourselves, what to be done better and what the experience you get through it. I hope our listeners got plenty out of it, and start practicing. I think Lottie gave a lot of golden nuggets on this particular episode. I think there are a lot of for us we can take. So thank you very much, Lottie. That was Lottie, founder, director at MindU. You can get connected on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And please do visit her website, www.mindu.co.nz. So she does some fantastic stuff, and there is a lot of article, and listen to her podcast. So I just listened one today morning just to get an idea what her works does. Fantastic. So that's what today's topic about episode about. Lottie, thank you very much for spending your valuable time and sharing your experience, the insight about this particular topic. And it has been amazing conversation with you, and I did learn a lot as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.